The sun was sinking behind the jagged rim of the mesa, casting long copper shadows across the Texas plains when Samuel Braddock first sensed something was wrong. The evening air should have been still, quiet except for the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the yucca. But tonight there was a tremor, tiny vibrations running through the earth beneath his boots. He stepped out onto the porch, the old cedar boards creaking softly, and squinted toward the horizon. A faint haze drifted upward, too wide for a wagon trail and too steady for wild horses. Samuel lifted his spyglass, brushing dust off the brass rim with his thumb before peering through it. What he saw jolted him with a cold shock. Riders, hundreds of them, moving in a single, unified wave. Their horses kicked up clouds of dust that glowed like bronze under the dying sun. As they came closer, Samuel could make out feathered lances catching the light, bare chests painted with streaks of red and black, and long, flowing hair whipping behind them in the wind. Comanche, not a peaceful visit, not a delegation, not a handful of warriors scouting the land. An army, 200, at least, maybe more, moving with the swift, fluid grace the Comanche were known for, as if the entire group shared a single heartbeat. Samuel's throat tightened. He lowered the spyglass slowly, forcing his breath to remain steady. Inside the house, Emily was humming a lullaby, soft, tender, a mother's instinctive shield against the world's harshness. Their newborn daughter lay in her arms, wrapped in a quilt Emily had sewn from leftover cloth. That gentle melody made Samuel's chest ache. It didn't belong in a moment like this. He pushed open the door, and Emily looked up immediately. One glance at his face was enough. The humming stopped. "Sam," she whispered. "What is it?" He swallowed. "Comanche. A lot of them." Her fingers tightened protectively around the baby. "How many?" "Too many." Fear flickered in her eyes, but she didn't scream, didn't panic. Emily Braddock had frontier steel in her bones, the kind that came from surviving droughts, storms, rattlesnakes, and loneliness in equal measure. Still, Samuel saw her free hand tremble. In the corner of the room, a pair of dark eyes stared back at them, wide, frightened, and still recovering from too much pain. Little Hawk, no older than 13, lay wrapped in blankets on the cot Samuel had built. The boy tried to sit up, grimacing at the soreness in his ribs. He knew. Of course he knew. Samuel knelt beside him. "Stay down. Your people are here." Little Hawk shook his head weakly. "They think I'm dead." Emily exchanged a fearful look with Samuel. The boy wasn't wrong. When Samuel had found him weeks ago, bleeding, unconscious, left on the bank of the river, he had assumed the same. But Samuel couldn't leave any child to die alone. He brought him home, fed him broth, changed his bandages, and kept vigil until the fever broke. He hadn't expected a Comanche war chief to come looking. Samuel returned to the porch, gripping the railing as the army approached his property. Hooves pounded the earth in a thunderous rhythm, raising a storm of dirt that drifted over the fields like smoke from a coming fire. The lead rider, a tall, broad-shouldered man with an eagle feather headdress, raised his hand sharply. As if pulled by invisible reins, the entire host stopped. Silence rolled across the land. Then the chief rode ahead alone. His voice carried like a bolt of thunder. "Braddock, you took what belongs to us." Samuel's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, shouting back, "I didn't take him. I found him dying." Samuel stepped off the porch slowly, as though approaching a skittish horse rather than a gathering of 200. Comanche warriors. The air felt thick, so still, so heavy, that every heartbeat sounded loud in his ears. He kept his hands raised and open to show he carried no weapon. A murmur rolled through the Comanche ranks like wind brushing across tall grass. They had expected fear. They had expected trembling. They had not expected a man who walked forward calm as stone. The chief dismounted, eyes never leaving Samuel. He was taller up close, with an aura that stretched far beyond his body, a presence born of battle survived and the burden of leadership carried. His face was lined with years of wind, war, and responsibility. His painted chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. "You say the child lives," the chief said. "Show him." Samuel nodded once. "But hear me first." The warriors bristled instantly. Several lifted their spears, feathers trembling in the low wind. The chief raised a single hand and they froze. The entire army listened when he commanded it. "Speak," the chief said. Samuel held his ground. "I found him near the river. Alone, unconscious, pale as death. Whoever hurt him left him to die." A ripple pulsed through the Comanche behind the chief, as if Samuel had stepped on a pressure point he didn't understand. The chief's jaw tightened, his expression sharpening like a blade catching sunlight. "You think we abandoned him?" the chief growled. "That we leave our own sons to rot in the mud?" Samuel's voice softened but didn't bend. "I don't know what happened. I only know he was dying. I brought him into my home. I saved his life. What price do you demand?" the chief asked bitterly. "Land, horses, meat. You expect us to trade for our own blood?" Samuel shook his head. "I expect nothing." The chief studied him, searching for a lie, but Samuel met his gaze steadily. Finally, Samuel stepped back toward the house. "I'll bring him out, and he'll tell you himself." He disappeared into the dim interior, where Emily had placed a trembling hand on the boy's shoulder. Little Hawk tried to stand, but pain struck across his ribs like lightning. "You don't have to do this," Emily whispered. Little Hawk shook his head. "If I don't speak, there will be war." Samuel helped him up, the boy leaning against his side like a sapling in a windstorm. Together they stepped into the sunlight. Gasps rose from the Comanche ranks, not at the boy's weakness, but at the sight of him alive. Little Hawk's father, the chief, stiffened. His stoic mask cracked just slightly. His eyes widened, and for an instant, the fierce war leader looked simply like a frightened father who had been bracing for the worst. "Father," the boy murmured. The chief's throat bobbed. The ground between them vibrated with emotion too heavy for words. But the chief forced his voice to remain stern. "You live," Little Hawk nodded slowly, "because he saved me." Samuel released the boy gently. Little Hawk took a shaky step on his own. "I was taken in the night by Kiowa raiders," the boy said. "Not by settlers. They dragged me to the river. They fought among themselves and left me. They believed the spirits would finish what they started." Whispers spread among the Comanche. Rage, grief, shame. It was a wound no warrior wanted exposed. The chief's eyes burned, not at Samuel, but at the truth. "You brought dishonor to no one," Samuel said quietly. "I only did what any man should do." The chief stepped forward, lowering his head until he was eye level with Samuel. "Why risk your home?" he asked. "Your wife, your child. You could have hidden the boy, or sent him away, or killed him to avoid our wrath." Samuel swallowed. "Because he's a child. Because life means something. Because I won't teach my daughter that fear decides our actions." The chief held his stare for a long, heavy silence. Then he straightened, inhaled, and pointed toward his warriors. "Enough." The army fell silent instantly. "What do you propose, Braddock?" the chief asked. Samuel took a breath. "A pact. Your people leave my ranch in peace. In return, I help you when I can. Treat the wounded, trade fairly, offer water when drought comes. No deceit, no fear, just respect." Part 3 expanded to approximately 700 words. The years that followed that fateful evening unfolded like a story the prairie itself had been waiting to tell. Samuel Braddock's choice, mercy over fear, trust over violence, echoed far beyond the boundaries of his ranch. What had begun as a tense standoff between a lone rancher and 100 Comanche warriors became something extraordinary, a living testament to the power of understanding and the courage to act against instinct. Comanche riders began to appear at the Braddock Ranch with increasing frequency, not in the dead of night to strike, but openly, riding proudly into the yard with trade goods, buffalo hides, and, occasionally, injured horses or warriors in need of care. Samuel and Emily, true to their word, welcomed them. They tended to wounds, offered clean water, and gave food. In return, the warriors brought gifts, finely carved pipes, beadwork, feathers, and occasionally small children they entrusted to the Braddocks for safety. Every interaction strengthened the fragile bond Samuel had forged on that first evening. Little Hawk recovered fully. He grew stronger, taller, more confident with every passing season, his laughter blending with the sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the slap of hooves on dirt, and the creak of the old cedar porch. Often he rode at the head of hunting parties, returning with stories of the plains, trophies from the hunt, and gifts for Emily's daughter. The girl, in turn, grew up learning Comanche words alongside English, braiding horsehair into intricate patterns, and even learning to track silently through the prairie under Little Hawk's guidance. The children's laughter echoed across the fields, bridging two worlds that history had told them should be enemies. The ranch hands, at first wary of the unexpected visitors, soon learned from them. They studied the Comanche techniques for tracking, riding silently, and reading the signs of weather or approaching danger. Samuel taught the warriors to repair tools, mend saddles, and construct shelters that could withstand storms. Together, they built something neither could have imagined, a community forged from mutual respect rather than fear. The chief, once an adversary, became more than an ally, he became a partner. Samuel and the chief met each season, discussing grazing lands, the migration of buffalo herds, and threats from rival tribes or settlers. They negotiated boundaries, set up safe passages, and devised agreements that kept both their people safe. Their handshake, once a fragile symbol of hope, became a ritual reaffirmed each year, reminding both men that peace required constant commitment. Word of the unusual alliance spread. Travelers, government emissaries, and neighboring settlers heard tales of the Braddock Ranch, a place where whites and Comanche lived and worked side by side, where cattle grazed freely, and no war parties dared to strike. One government official, visiting years later, found himself staring in disbelief at the sight, children running alongside Comanche warriors, women cooking over open fires while warriors helped with chores, and Samuel overseeing the land like a general without a single soldier. "What miracle is this?" the emissary asked, voice trembling with both curiosity and incredulity. Samuel smiled, his face weathered but calm. "No miracle, just one choice." The emissary frowned. "One choice?" Samuel nodded. "On that evening, I decided to choose mercy instead of fear. I decided that my daughter would grow up in a world where understanding mattered more than hatred. That decision changed everything." Little Hawk, now a young man and respected leader among the Comanche, stood beside Samuel. His voice carried the weight of history as he spoke, "And my father made the same choice. Peace is never the decision of just one man. It is born when both sides dare to see the humanity in the other." The alliance that sprang from that evening extended beyond the ranch. The surrounding lands saw fewer raids, fewer stolen horses, and fewer lives lost to pointless violence. Families on both sides shared news, food, and stories, creating bonds that neither Samuel nor the chief could have imagined in their youth. Generations grew up knowing that courage wasn't just about holding a rifle, it was about holding faith in the possibility of a better future. Years later, long after the Comanche and the Braddocks had left the plains for new challenges, historians would look back at this small piece of Texas. They would see a ranch that had survived not because of walls or guns, but because of trust and courage. They would see how one man's choice to act with honor, even when it could cost him everything, had reshaped the lives of hundreds of people, altered the course of local history, and created a legacy of peace in a time dominated by conflict. Samuel Braddock died an old man, surrounded by Emily, their children, and grandchildren, both white and Comanche. Little Hawk, now a respected chief, stood at his side. Together, they had built more than a ranch. They had built a story that would outlast them, a living reminder that a single choice, made in the face of fear, could change history forever. The prairie, wide and eternal, whispered their tale on the wind. The mesas caught the light of the setting sun just as they had on that first fateful evening, and for anyone who listened closely, they could almost hear the faint echo of 200 hooves that had once thundered toward a ranch, only to turn away in awe and respect. The day Samuel Braddock didn't choose fear, he didn't just save a boy. He saved a future, and in doing so, he changed everything.